What is going on, Babylonians? That's right, it's me, Songs of Rage, back with another video for Outriders to bring to you. And today we're actually going to look into another top 5. It's been a while. I wanted to get back into it and actually discuss some of the actual mods that are in this game. So today we're going to look at the top 5 just armor mods that are actually in the game that are universal across all the classes. So you can pick this up, and what we're trying to avoid is any kind of like tier 1 or tier 3 skills that are specific to the classes. And there is also a tier 2 mod that is specific to a pyromancer, and we're going to avoid that one altogether as well, because obviously only a pyromancer can use it. So any of these mods that are on this list, even though you can only get on certain classes in some cases, just to give you a hint as to what's going to be appearing, you can still transfer across to your class, and you can still pick these up from the mod menu. So these will be fully available to you and will actually benefit your class. So there will be a few honourable mentions thrown in there because there was just so many good mods to be able to choose from. It really was difficult to be able to kind of tone it down. I did start with a list of 13. I managed to make it a top 5 with 3 honourable mentions. So without further ado, let's get into it and look at number 5. So coming in at number 5 on our list today is going to be the Stare into the Barrel tier 3 mod, and the reason why this makes it onto the list is just the sheer amount of numbers and firepower that this can offer just by itself. Now obviously there are a few of the mods that we're going to be talking about a little bit later on in this video that give you firepower, but this one just gives you firepower for just being near enemies, and that just makes it so easy to be able to activate. You don't need to wind yourself up, you don't need to get any kind of kills, you don't need to meet any kind of criteria apart from the fact that you're just getting up close with the enemies, and some of them, the enemies are just going to be doing that to you to get to you in the first place, so it just gives you that nice benefit. Obviously technomancers aren't really going to be benefiting from this as such because they like to keep their enemies at long range, so it kind of is a contradiction to be able to have firepower when enemies get up close to you, but the fact that it benefits the other 3 classes in this, so Devastators, Pyromancers and Tricksters when it comes to firepower, being 3 against 1, it really does have to make it on there. And just like I said, the sheer numbers it does offer to be able to increase your firepower just that much, to be able to give you that nice DPS, it really did have to make it onto the list. So yeah, it's coming in at number 5 is Stare into the Barrel. Now if you're looking to be able to get this mod yourself, you can get it from Tanner's Hat, and then that's a legendary hat, obviously helmet that you can get from the game. I'd recommend doing expeditions, but obviously you can still do the hunt just to be able to try and get yourself that armor piece. So coming in at number 4, we've got the status kind of effects that have the extra multiplier to be able to inflict a 25% more damage. And these are Euthaniser, Shatter and Tainted Blood. Now obviously some of these are a bit more beneficial depending on the classes that you're going for. For example, Euthaniser and Shatter are more beneficial for a Technomancer, especially a Borealis kind, and Tainted Blood is more there for the bleed versions of Devastators, primarily used in anomaly power builds, but they can be used in others as well. And sometimes Tricksters with their Vampiric Mags actually used to be able to get away with Tainted Blood for the fact they will be able to inflict a crit shot, inflict bleed through one of their mods, and then obviously get their mag refilled through that, as well as deal extra damage to through Tainted Blood. So the fact these are not just purely firepower kind of focused ones, so it's not just your bullet damage that's being increased by the 25%, it is in fact all damage increased by 25%, really is what makes these stand out. And the fact that it's just a flat multiplier similar to those of like Fortress, where you can just it's as long as you meet the condition, you're getting that extra damage. It really does make them so much easier to be able to use, and obviously certain classes get to use these a bit easier than others, but it was just so difficult for me to even leave these off. They really did have to make it onto this list, but I'm going to put them a little bit lower down because not all classes can benefit as easy from them, so I'm going to put them in at the number 4 spot. So coming in at the number 3 spot will be no surprise to anyone that's been recently watching our videos, and the fact that the no resistance against the Fortified is just so good, purely for the fact that it is bugged, granted. So obviously if this does get fixed, then this would obviously drop off the top 5 list, but for the time being it really is that good, for the fact that you can now make a Pyromancer just see stupid values in terms of their anomaly power, for the fact that you can have at least 5 of these on your build, and potentially more depending on, obviously, if you skip the legendary armor and you actually managed to find some min-maxed armor that already had this on, and then you replaced it with the second one, you could see some even more daft values go on for this. So for the time being, while this is currently still bugged and that is still in the game, it really does have to make the top 5 spot, and I had to only put it at 3. I couldn't wouldn't push it any higher up the list because, let's be honest, it is a bug. You do need several of these to be able to make it any kind of good and make it worthwhile, but it is still a really good mod in its own right, and it would be interesting to see if this still gets used after it does get fixed. Coming in our number 2 spot, our runner-up is gonna have to be Captain Hunter. Now, it was really difficult to be able to decide between this and what we actually put at number 1, but Captain Hunter really is such a good mod to be able to do those high tier challenge tiers in the end game, just purely for how many elites do actually show up, and it is almost the perfect mod to be able to run, to be able to do things like Eye of the Storm, where you're seeing Alpha Perforos, where you're seeing Broodmothers, and obviously Yagak with the end, and that 25% really does come in clutch most of the time. If you're going for similar to how the status ones work, you purely meet the condition of this just by having an elite on the field, and every single time you hit them, whether it be anomaly power, whether it be firepower, any kind of builds like that, as long as you are hitting them, you're dealing that extra 25% damage, and it really does come in clutch sometimes, and it really does escalate some builds from mediocre to god tier. It also does affect things like Moaning Winds, so if you're ever going for some kind of like Anomaly Power Devastator build, and you're really starting to struggle with those elites because you just can't deal the damage enough, I would highly recommend that you pop on a Captain Hunter and just start seeing those numbers increase massively. So yeah, I would make sure you get one of these. These roll typically on the Cannonball Gauntlets of all things. The Cannonball is obviously regarded as like one of the worst legendary sets in the game. It's almost become a meme at this point, and the fact that this top tier mod really does fall on one of the Cannonball pieces is just absolutely baffling and just makes it even more funny. So make sure you keep your eyes open for Cannonball Gauntlets. Make sure you grab yourself this tier 3 mod and make sure you get it put onto your builds at all costs. So before we crack on into the top spot in our own opinion as to why the best universal armor mod to be able to use in Outriders, we're going to go through a couple of honourable mentions. I managed to get 3, so we're going to go through those nice and quickly and touch on why they just missed out on the top spots or just being able to crack into the top 5 just for the time being. So first off, we got Unstoppable Force, where increase your anomaly power by 50% of your resistance piercing. This is a must-have when it comes to any kind of anomaly power build. The only problem is that you can only grab this if you have a Pyromancer, and that has got 2 endgame kind of capabilities. So the only way that this can be easily obtained, granted, it is very useful in that kind of sense because this can be grabbed from Tiago. Tiago sells it. As long as you've got the drop pod resources, you can grab yourself a pair, dismantle it for the mod, put it onto a few of the armor pieces, put them in your stash, and then transfer it between all of your characters. And I highly recommend that you do this for every single one of them that's out there, because if you are going for any of anomaly power builds, you do need this mod, especially as most of the time the bottom tree for your skills will actually go into your resistance piercing, and obviously you're then giving yourself a nice little multiplier to be able to increase your anomaly power. There are ways to be able to increase your resistance piercing. For example, the Technomancer has something on their minigun builds where they're able to increase their resistance piercing by a flat amount, and then obviously every single time you pull out your minigun, as long as you've got this mod on, you're increasing your anomaly power even more and giving yourself a nice percentage bonus. So things like that, things like the Devastator, where they can increase their resistance piercing when they do a melee with a certain skill tree point, and obviously it gets even more busted when you put it on the Pyromancer and you're using it with no resistance against the Fortified, and you're starting to see some stupid numbers really get fed back into it with some mod combinations. So because it's kind of difficult to obtain unless you're going for a specific class to be able to grab it, and because it only affects anomaly power builds, and obviously only certain anomaly power builds are viable in this game currently as it currently stands, it just misses out on the top 5 for me. But please just take that with a pinch of salt. It is still a really good mod, and make sure you do grab it for every single one of your anomaly power builds. In our next honourable mention, we also have Power Assimilation. Now, I do love the idea of this mod, and I do run it on most of my builds, and that's purely because I want to be able to deal even more damage when elites show up, and sometimes I like to even use the elites to be able to give myself a nice power boost to be able to deal with most of the other enemies, and then focus on the elites. And the reason why is because this gives you so much anomaly power per elite that's present on the battlefield, so it doesn't really make sense to be able to take on the elite straight away. It makes sense to actually use that power boost to be able to to wipe out everything else, and then start focus on the elites. That way you keep the anomaly power booster as long as possible. Now it also helps you obviously deal extra damage to elites, because obviously their presence being on the battlefield, you're able to actually hit even harder with your skills. So combine this with Captain Hunter and our top and our number 2 spot, you can obviously get some nice damage numbers out there. Now in terms of this mod, it's a nice boost, but it's very difficult to be able to get anything kind of meaningful out of it, and that's just purely for the fact that unless you've got you're running specific expeditions like Drought Palace, where over like 5 elites can spawn at one time, obviously then you'll see a nice boost to your power, but most of the time you'll only see like 1 or 2 just going to grace the battlefield, and that way you're not really getting as much of a benefit out of it as possible. So I like it, it's just a bit too inconsistent, it relies too much on the level that you're actually playing, and that's why I have to keep it as an honourable mention. I'd like the idea, I just can't say it's one of the top 5, unfortunately. And then lastly, I want to touch on Emergency Stance. Now, this was a top tier mod. This was probably one of the best mods out there when the game first launched, because it was bugged and because it actually gave you the golem effect, protective effect, basically the whole time, even though it looked like it had worn off. You basically gain that nice 65% damage reduction. As long as your health dropped below 30% for once at one time during the expedition, you then gain that 65% damage reduction for the rest of the expedition until you teleported away. And obviously that was broken. Obviously that, that shouldn't have been in the game. But pre-patch, this was probably like easy top 1. You would never go down, you would never die. This would be your perfect kind of like stay up and just keep the fight going kind of mods. But now it's kind of more niche because of obviously the long cooldown. Obviously the golem effect only lasts for 4 seconds. It's still good, it's just not as anywhere near the kind of like the power level that it used to be. Because of what it used to stand for, I'm going to give it an honourable mention, but yeah, obviously it's just nowhere near what it used to be. So coming in at the number 1 spot, and I really want you to drop a comment down in the comment section below if you actually managed to guess any of these, is because we're actually going to do another combination of mods to be able to signify the top 1 spot, because there really isn't much that separates the 3. So we're actually going to go for Bloodlust, Crit Stack, and Sharp Eye. And the reason why these get the spots that they currently do is because firepower metas are pretty much prevalent in the game at the moment. Let's be honest, everyone kind of goes for either a firepower trickster or a firepower techno. Most of the time it's a firepower techno, and that's just the main way of going about the game. Now obviously if you're going for anomaly power, you would probably go for some kind of Ash Blast Pyro, or you'll go for a debuff Pyro, which then obviously feeds into that of the firepower Technomancer. Now obviously these are the main core duos of the game. That's not the only way you can play this game, of course not, but those are probably, let's be honest, they're held in the highest of regards because of just how good those two classes actually are. And that's where Bloodlust, Crit Stack, and Sharp Eye kind of come into it, because as a firepower Technomancer, you will probably be rocking at least 2, if not all 3 of these mods, because we're just racking up the kills and racking up the critical shots, which you should be doing as a Technomancer as well. You're just ending up with an insane amount of firepower, and that is what allows you to be able to hit the high crits and the high damage and the high DPS that you actually can offer as a class. So I do genuinely feel that without these kind of skills available in your build, you would probably, well, you definitely wouldn't be running any kind of ideal class or any ideal Technomancer, and that's why these become basically crucial, or they become some kind of crutch armor mod, and that's just what makes the class so good. So I have to put these at number 1, because if I was going to choose any mods to be able to start any kind of firepower build, I would have to start looking here first and then work my way down the list. So because of that, they have to be in the number 1 spot for me. So that pretty much wraps up the top 5 universal armor mods that are in Outriders right now, in our opinion. And this was a lot of fun to be able to do. I did start with a list of, like I said, around about 13. There were some I had to cut all together. I only wanted a few honorable mentions, and even then that was still difficult. So to try and make a top 5 list, to then try and make a top 3 honorable mentions, it was just so difficult. There really are such good armor mods out there. Obviously on the back end of that, there are some really bad, really awful armor mods out there, and maybe I'll make a top 5 like the least used or the worst armor mods that are actually in this game. But I hope you've appreciated the fact that I've grouped some of them together just purely for the fact that they do very, very similar things, and I hope you've learned something with this, and I hope you've enjoyed. It just leaves us a little bit of time to say if you thought any difference, if you thought my top 5 is wrong in any kind of way, please feel free to let me know down in the comment section down below. I really will be reading through every single one of the comments, and I'd be interested to see what people think are the top 5 combinations, or if maybe we actually got it right. Obviously, make sure to keep it so that it actually does include a mix of firepower and anomaly, because we are trying to look at it from both sides of the coin here, and that's what I've tried to do with my list as well. So make sure you keep some, but by all means, let me know your top 5 armor mods that are in the game, and make sure they are universal, and I'll have a look through those. It also leaves us a bit of time to be able to say thank you so much, as obviously to the members of Babylon, and make sure you click that join button that's right next to the subscribe button. It really does start from as little as 99p a month, and it really does let us know that you're so interested in our content, that we're doing the right things for you as well. So it really does put a smile on our faces, and it just encourages us to be able to keep doing what we're doing. Massive thank you to all those that are currently members, and you've seen their names on the screen right now, and that just leaves me to say thank you so much. Keep yourself safe, keep yourself well, and I'll see you all on that next video.